Hello, I'm Herm Gailey, here today to talk about a topic near and dear to my heart, bits. I'm a little bit of a bit freak. I've got a few of the bits that I have laid out here on this table. In my tack room, I probably got roughly 200 more. I don't need 200 bits, but they all seemed like a good idea at the time, and they've all been the basis for some experimentation that let me narrow things down to a fairly limited number of bits that I use on a regular basis. And that other 140 bits or 180 bits is out there if I need them. And every so often you'll find a horse reach up there among the rafters where I hang these things and say, this is what he needs. And lo and behold, it works. And by gosh, if it's gonna work, I very likely have it. So we're gonna do a series of relatively short videos working our way through the principles and properties of bits. We're going to start with the very basic concept of the difference between the two primary varieties of bits, the snaffle and the curb. In this case, we'll be talking about Western curbs, not about the English bridles or the hunter jumper, dressage, gaited horse bridles so much as Western curbs. But regardless, the principles of a snaffle and a curb remain the same. There are lots of things to talk about with bits, what they're made of, different specific types of snaffles, different specific types of curbs, the parts of the curb, the parts of the snaffle. But for now, let's talk about the difference between the two and how they work. The primary difference is very simple. A snaffle bit, such as this bit right here, works on a one-to-one mechanical principle. So if you pull back, it's a straight back pull on a straight line, assuming you don't have any device connected to it like a running martingale or a German martingale or draw reins or any uncivilized device like those. This pulls straight back. There is no mechanical advantage to it at all. It's a one-to-one pull. There is no curb strap or chain, nothing that compresses under the horse's chin and creates a higher degree of leverage. So a snaffle is a non-leverage bit. A curb, on the other hand, and this is an old, very simple curb bit, this works on a leverage principle. It does have a shank. That's the lever. It does have this curb chain, which creates the resistance that activates the lever. So if you use my arm as the equivalent of the horse's mouth, watch the curb strap get compressed. And if you do this yourself, you'll feel how much pressure you can generate. If you were to put a snaffle in the crook of your arm and pull on it, it would feel exactly like what you'd expect if you just pulled with your other hand. Here, you're getting a bit of a vice effect. So these bits by nature are somewhat more severe, somewhat more mechanically powerful. That's the difference. They're all different types of curbs, but every curb bit has a mechanical element, and it compresses down under the horse's chin and in the mouthpiece. And there are various places within the horse's mouth and even up at his poll that are affected by the mechanics of the bit. That's something we're going to talk about in another video. But for now, let's look at the difference. The snaffle, as we said, has no such mechanical advantage. If you pull back, it's just a straight line pull. You will see snaffles with curb straps. That doesn't create a mechanical advantage because there's no shank there to activate it. That's simply to prevent pulling that snaffle through the horse's mouth, which is not a good place to be. So the curb straps that you see on snaffles do not do anything mechanically except to keep that bit from having the rings rotate and pulled into the horse's mouth. Now, what makes a snaffle is having rings as opposed to a shank and having a one-on-one mechanical ratio. What doesn't make a snaffle bit, and this is widely misunderstood, is the type of mouthpiece. This is what many people call a snaffle mouthpiece. And in fact, this single-jointed, single-action snaffle bit is the commonest type. But it is not what defines a snaffle bit at all. The rings and the one-on-one mechanical advantage is what does. This bit here, believe it or not, is every bit as much a snaffle as this one. It has what you'd refer to as a slight mullen mouthpiece. It's a big old bit somebody gave me. It's a workhorse bit. It's enormous. I don't have anything I've ever been able to put it on, but it's just kind of cool. It's hand hammered, real old. I just hang it up and look at it. Maybe if I have an enormous horse sometime, I'll use it. But this is a snaffle, every bit as much as that jointed mouthpiece. This also has a barrel across it, keeps the bit from compressing. Some people feel that there is a nutcracker effect with the standard jointed mouthpiece. This, in theory, prevents that. I think it probably does, to the extent it actually exists. I don't think that the nutcracker effect is as big a deal as what people make it out to be, except in certain instances, which we'll get into when we talk about the mechanics of bits. This bit with a chain mouthpiece, which I bought off the bargain rack somewhere. You see them? I always wondered how they'd work. Bought one, never really called my name out, and I've never had it on a headstall. Maybe someday I'll have a horse this would seem to help, but this, with these multiple joints in the form of the chain, is every bit as much a snaffle as what people like to call the snaffle bit. This is a three-piece. Technically it's called a Dr. Bristol. The Western folks who are a little more plain-spoken call it a dog bone. This, with the multiple joints, creates a little different action, but it's just as much a snaffle as that single-jointed headstall or single-jointed mouthpiece. Now this, people would say, well, what's that? It's a shank snaffle, or it's a sort of an Argentine type snaffle. I'm not going to quarrel with anybody for using that term, but technically this is a jointed curb, and it works off leverage the same as this bit does. So the mouthpiece here does not make this any more a snaffle than if it had this low port solid mouthpiece. The distinguishing characteristic is the compression. So that is the difference between snaffles and curbs. Snaffles are a single ratio, one-on-one straight back pull. Curb bit has leverage, has a mechanical advantage, activated by a curb strap. Shanks and a curb chain make this bit with a jointed mouthpiece not a snaffle. But the fact that this bit has rings and the mouthpiece isn't jointed doesn't disqualify it as a snaffle. It is technically every bit as much a snaffle as that standard jointed bit. Two other things we ought to touch on. One is the great bit versus bitless controversy. On that debate, I take no position whatsoever. To each his own. If you don't like a bit, don't use it. If you do, go ahead and use it responsibly. Whether you're using a hackamore or a bit, this is where the problem usually lies. Not here or here or anywhere else on this table. It rests right on the end of your arms in your hands. Most uncivilized things that happen between horse and rider involving a bit, the problem is at the end of the reins away from the bit in the rider's hands. So use your hands responsibly And what you put in the horse's mouth will matter less. You're not going to correct bad hands with a good bit. So those are some thoughts and some differences between snaffles and curbs. Next time, we're going to talk about different kinds of snaffle bits, because there's an infinite variety that can be used for young horses or horses that you want to keep in a snaffle bit for whatever reason, that are still snaffles but are very different. Till then.